Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everybody. It's time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today we're talking about books that make you feel like a genie and go on magical adventures. Kids love magical stories, ones that inspire them and make them feel like they can do anything. Growing up, if you were like me, you loved TV shows like I Dream of Jeannie, which starred Barbara Eden as a genie who lived in a bottle and she granted wishes, often with very comedic results. Barbara Eden's children's book, Barbara and the Djinn, written along with Dustin Warburton and featuring illustrations by Jason Moore, is a BookFest award-winning book. Barbara and the Djinn, it's an exciting story of a young girl's trip into a mysterious and magical book that transports her to places that her imagination could only dream of. Throughout her journey, she meets a charming and wizardly genie who brings her on these adventures filled with so much excitement. It is with exhilaration this young girl learns what is most important in life: kindness, and above all, understanding. Barbara Eden, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Fabulous. So this is really a neat book. And I love that you pull in the TV show that I remember you from. And it kind of is this cool wraparound, because when I was a little girl watching the show, it made you think about and believe in magic. Can you talk a little bit about the book and how it kind of infuses these themes of magic and wonder and adventure?
Well, I wanted to offer something to small children that was a huge gift to me when I was growing up. In fact, I think I was in kindergarten, and my mother and my aunt used to take me to the library and read to me, got me a library card, and I have been a reader ever since. And I wanted to show children that it's a wonderful, wonderful world you can go to, especially if things aren't going too well at home. you can just go to another land in a book. I wanted to offer something that was unique and true to me, and that was Genie. And I thought she could be that magic carpet for the children. And that's that.
I love it. And the book has a strong message of being kind. Can you talk about the theme, the message of the book?
Well, the little girl goes on a trip. She's offered a book, you see, by a very strange man in the library. And she opens the book and meets a genie. The genie comes out. And he takes her on a trip that really opens her eyes and makes her more sensitive to other people. She learns what kindness and understanding is in our fellow man. So it's and yet it's fun. It's fun to do. Growing up, I read books like The Secret Garden and all the Oz books by Baum. So they did that for me. They made me see another world.
Yeah. Why do you feel that women and girls, it's important for them to have role models and to be able to see themselves as the character in these books? Because I think back of like Alibaba and stories like that, and they were wonderful and inspiring, but a lot of times there was a little boy, not a little girl. How do you feel about inspiring young girls?
I think it's very important, but I also think it's important that they don't realize you're doing this on purpose, that they have to know that this is a normal thing, a real thing, and that you can do with books. You can. And I hope my book does that.
Oh, it definitely does. And it's a beautiful book. It's beautifully illustrated. Can you talk a little bit about your journey in creating it? Is there anything that you learned about yourself while working with your co-writer and the illustrator and putting it together?
I'm always, no matter what I do, I'm learning things about myself. Um, we we as human beings are always learning, hopefully. Um, I loved working with Dustin. He's has a huge imagination. And of course, he's a teacher and he works with children. So he knew what would happen. And oh my goodness, I think I was so lucky to have the illustrator. Um, he was a gift. He was a gift. Jason Moore. I God bless them both. I was so happy to have them on board.
And it's a beautifully illustrated book, absolutely captivating. We're showing, for people who are listening, you can't see, but for those of you who watch on our YouTube channel, you can see some of the images from the book showing on the screen. So make sure you do check it out because it's absolutely delightful. And you mentioned educators, teachers, and I always think as a marketer, the audience for children's books unfortunately has to be mom and dad, educators, librarians, because they're the ones who end up getting the book. Aunts, uncles, grandparents. What message would you like to share with the adults who might be interested in picking the book up for the little one in their life?
Well, I would just encourage them, like my aunt and my mother did, to read to their children before the child is even in school, to get them hooked on this wonderful gift. I call it a gift because it was for me. Um, and educators are important, very important, but the very first impressions children get are from their family. So someone in that family has to introduce them to books and to the stories and make them know that there's a whole world before them that they can have all to themselves any time they wish. I was growing up, I was an only child for many years. And my mom and dad didn't have the money to get a babysitter. So I would always go with them everywhere, even even to nightclubs. And but I would always have a book. And I'd sit there and I'd read my book while maybe the dancing girls were dancing by. But it was my world. It was my world. And I really want to share that with other children. It's important.
So very important. And nowadays you see little ones, whether it's at a restaurant or in the park. I've seen it in the park where instead of reading a book, they're on a device, an iPad or a phone. And I think there's something to be said about holding a book and the paper and the feel of it and the smell of it. It's just such a visceral, wonderful experience.
It is. It is. And the print's important. Being able to read. I guess that goes along with writing too, because they're not teaching cursive now for children. And it's important that they know how to read and write. I mean, that's the first thing you do usually when you go to school, or should be.
Yeah, exactly. Can we talk a little bit because you've had a 60-year plus iconic Hollywood career?
Ouch.
Your publicist gave me that note, so
That's all right. Perfectly all right.
So, thinking back when you were on the set and doing I Dream of Jeannie, did you ever imagine where that might take you?
No, I had no idea. I was working so hard, as most actors do. People don't know this, but in between, I would do a session of Genie one year, and in between, I would be appearing in Las Vegas singing or doing a movie for television. Or I guess I did two films, one for Universal, one for Columbia, while I was doing I Dream of Jeannie. So you're on a almost like a treadmill, and you don't realize what's happening in this other world, this world of television. Uh, I am so happy and fulfilled because people still like it. I had no idea that would happen.
Oh, it is iconic. I think too there was a resurgence in a lot of television shows during the pandemic. People wanted it was like comfort food. They wanted to, kind of go back to a time where it was simpler and it was, familiar. So I think too people just really love being able to have that foundation and be able to reminisce to a large degree. And you have a memoir out too. It's actually been out for a few years now. New York Times bestselling memoir, Genie Out of the Bottle. And I know people can read that too, right? If they'd like to learn a little bit more about your history and those early days in Hollywood, right?
Yes, it's yes, it tells everything. I'm afraid it's a little embarrassing.
Oh no, okay.
But I did share a great deal in that
Yeah.
book for people. Yeah.
Memoirs are one of those things. It's soul bearing. I know so many authors who have written their memoirs and it's cathartic and it's scary and everything else. So kudos for you for doing it. Cause I know, I understand it's hard.
Well, you don't realize that until you get into it. And you think, oh goodness, did I say that? And
Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah.
Now, in there too, it talks about the days when you were a contract player with
Yeah.
20th Century Fox. Because I mean, I think, nowadays they don't necessarily have that in the entertainment industry. And that was just a whole different world, wasn't it?
Well, it was. I was used to, in San Francisco, of course, I was singing, but also doing theater. I was a member of Actors Equity, and all my acting had been done on stage. I always referred to 20th Century Fox as my finishing school because I learned the camera and lighting and things that I never would have anywhere else. It was a wonderful experience. Yes.
And even for a brief moment, you were Johnny Carson's sidekick?
Well, I don't know that I was a sidekick, but that was one of my first jobs in Los Angeles. And I did comedy sketches with Johnny. And the way do you want this whole story about how I got my job?
Yeah, please. Sure.
All right. My agent had called me and told me to go on an interview at CBS. I didn't know what it was for. And she said, and he said, wear your sexy dress. I only had one dress that was sexy. So I wore the sexy dress, but it was a very cold day. So I had a big fluffy white coat I put on over it. I parked in the CBS parking lot. It was cold outside. I walked inside the doors of CBS and it was freezing. They had the air conditioner up so high. Went up to like the fourth floor and had my interview with the director of the show, but I couldn't take my coat off. I left my coat on and I came out and it was not good. I knew I hadn't gotten the job. The next week, my agent called me again and said, Barbara, go back to CBS. You have another interview, but take your coat off. So I went back and I did take my coat off. I was very embarrassed. I felt ridiculous taking it off. You're going, ta-da! But I took the coat off, had the same interview with the same man. And I knew, again, I didn't get the interview. I knew it. And I walked down the hall and there was some men at the, where the water fountain. And I knew they were making remarks and I just smiled and, walked past them. Then one of them detached himself, came over, took my arm. He said, you don't mind, do you? And I said, no, I don't mind. I was beyond minding because I knew I didn't have the job. And he said, he walked me to the elevator, put me in the elevator, and then said, were you interviewing with blah, blah? I've forgotten the man's name, the director. I said, yes. He said, did you get the job? And I said, no. He said, okay, we'll see. And he walked back and he was the producer of the show. And I did get that first chance. And after the show, the director who had interviewed me came over and apologized. He said, "I'm sorry." He said, you were too intelligent." He said, "I wanted a dumb blonde who could sing off key. You studied at the conservatory. You had a lot, you were, actors equity, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "I just didn't, I made that mistake a lot of directors do, that you have to have the person who can only do this one thing." So after that, I did about 8 shows with Johnny Carson. I wasn't his sidekick, but I did comedy sketches with him, and it was wonderful. It was a good start for me in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when you were on I Dream of Jeannie, even showing the belly button, that was on television then. Like the outfit, that was very risque, wasn't it?
Oh boy, yes, it was. Uh, we didn't know it was until Mike Conley from the Hollywood Reporter came down, and he'd look at me because he was looking for things to print in Variety. No, it was Hollywood Reporter, and he'd poke me in the middle and say, "Where's your belly button?" And I'd tell him, "Nickel a peek." I was inexpensive then, so he began writing about it, and then the stringers across the country picked it up, and for some reason it was a funny story for them. And all of a sudden, standards and practices began to look at our show and say, the costume, the arm, the legs are too sheer. She can't show her belly button, which only peeked out once in a while, and they were very strict with us, and it was hysterical. We used to laugh about it on the set.
Oh, I can imagine. And the wonderful thing about your talent is it's multiverse, like you're saying. They wanted you to, unfortunately, kind of dumb it down and be that stereotypical role, but you had so much talent, and the comedic experience and timing and everything, that's no small feat. It looks seamless and easy, but it's really hard to have that comedic talent, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's hard. I think you have to have a sense of humor. And I was lucky again in my family because they were always pranking around the house, doing pranks on each other. My mother and her sister, my aunt, would they were always laughing and chasing each other around the house, and I just grew up in a family that had a good sense of humor, and I was lucky.
Hmm. Hmm. And back then too, you were working with, I remember Larry Hagman, who went on to be on Dallas and other shows. Really a great cast. What was it like working with Hagman and some of the others back then?
Oh, and Hayden Rourke, Dr. Bellows.
Yeah.
I adored him. He was, yeah, we were very lucky. We had a great cast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, there's this story too about an encounter that you had with Marilyn Monroe once upon a time. Would you like to talk about that?
Oh yes, it was just wonderful. Marilyn and I had the same stand-in at Fox, Evelyn Moriarty. She had been my stand-in in How to Marry a Millionaire, which is another series that Fox had put me in. And Evie, whenever I do a film at Fox, of course, Evie was my stand-in. But there came a time when Marilyn and I were doing movies at the same time. And Evie came to me and said, "Barbara," she was from, I don't know where, Brooklyn or something. "Barbara, I've got to leave you, honey, because I have to be with my other star." And I said, "What?" "You can't leave me. We're in the middle of the movie." I think it was, what was it? It was one of the Irwin Allen movies I did. And I said, I can't. She said, "Oh, but she needs me." I said, I need you. She said, no, Barbara, she really needs me. So she left. Then during maybe a week passed, Evie came back over on the set and she said, my other star wants to meet you. And I said, OMG, I can't, well, I was nonplussed. I wanted to meet Marilyn, of course, but I couldn't leave the set. So Evie, little busybody, went over and got the director to let me leave and go next door to meet Marilyn. And that was the most beautiful experience. I have never met anyone quite so beautiful. Her skin glowed. She was, her whole aura was one that you just didn't want to leave. Everything you saw on screen was exactly what she was in person. And sweet, beautiful. I really mourned her when she died. She was a lovely, lovely, sweet human being.
Yeah. What did you talk about? What did you discuss with Marilyn? What was that conversation like?
Not much. Evie, of course, walked on the set and immediately said, Marilyn, I want you to meet my other star. Now, come on. I was not a star in Marilyn Monroe's category, but she was so gracious. She came out and said, how do you do? And how nice to meet you. And then she looked at me and said, and I'd love to meet your kids. And, well, you see, Evie had babies sat for my son. And I guess she told Marilyn. And I was a little kids plural. I only had one. But how lovely of her to say that.
Yeah.
And even remember that Evie told her. I'll never forget her.
Oh, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to have just a little bit of fun. I'm going to name 4 male names, and you tell me, just girl to girl, what one would be the most fun to date if you had that experience. Elvis Presley, Clint Eastwood, Paul Newman, or Warren Beatty. So again, your 4 choices: Elvis Presley, Clint Eastwood, Paul Newman, Warren Beatty. Who was maybe the best that a girl could want to date?
Well, you couldn't want to date?
Yeah, go on a date with.
Yeah, well, you see, with all those men, I was married, so I really didn't think about dating them. In retrospect, I can tell you who was most fun.
Sure.
Actually, it was Tony Randall. And I did The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm at MGM with Tony, and he had a fabulous sense of humor. We just laughed, and I'll give you an example. We played gin rummy in between sets, and he always won. Every single time he won. I finally realized he seated me in front of a mirror. He knew exactly what I had in my hand. But we just had a lot of fun. The other person in your list, Paul Newman, was gracious and lovely and wonderful, and it was one of my very first jobs, and I had a very small scene with him, but he was a cutie. Yeah. Elvis Presley was a divine, lovely man, a gentleman, talented. The movie he did was so out of character for him. He played a half-breed who died and didn't get the girl. So it was a total off the charts part for him, and he was excellent in it. Excellent. But he didn't sing. And so after it came out, they added a couple of songs for him to sing. I could think most of the in-between shots, I enjoyed being with Elvis Presley because he and one of he called him a cousin, but apparently wasn't, who had a guitar, and Elvis's father was there. And Elvis and his friend would play the guitar and sing. Well, talk about gifts. That was a wonderful experience. And he was just a sweet, sweet guy. I liked him a lot.
Oh, I can imagine. It sounds like it.
I
Thank you
must,
for.
I must tell you something, though. I know that most of the women who have worked with Elvis have had affairs with him. I did not. My husband at that time was Michael Ansara, and Elvis was a huge fan of Mike's. So it was a wonderful experience.
It absolutely sounds like it. And I love that you shared those stories with us. Thank you so much for that. I do want to circle back to your book, though, your children's book, Barbara and the Djinn, and find out what might be next. Are you going to write more children's books? What's planned for the future?
We haven't planned any, but I'm sure that Dustin and Jason would be up for it. I would love to do another one. Yes, I enjoyed it.
I can see it, because that's the great thing with writing a book about adventures. You can just keep going on more and more adventures. It never ends.
And it's very close to my heart. So
Yes.
I'd really love to do it again. Yes.
Oh, I hope you do. And if you do, please come back, talk to us again. Would love to have you back to talk about your second children's book. And of course, we talked a little bit about Genie Out of the Bottle, which is your memoir. So you've written a few books now. Congratulations for doing that. Thank you so much for being with us today. Can you let people know, do you have a website? Are you on social media? Can people
I have a website, yes, and social media. I have someone that does that for me, Patterson Lundquist, and it's very fulfilling. Yeah.
Fantastic. Barbara Eden, author of her memoir, Genie Out of the Bottle, a New York Times bestseller, as well as her latest children's book, Barbara and the Djinn, which is available anywhere you can find fine books. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Books That Make You Show, Barbara.
Thank you, Desiree. This has been so much fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for joining us as well on the Books That Make You Show. You can find out more on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. Don't forget to subscribe to our Webby award-winning newsletter, so you're always up to date on the Books That Make You shows. You can find out how you can win books and prizes, plus get news and information for bibliophiles. Until next time, all of my book buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.